We go.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks so much for all of you guys to come. So we've got Joe in the call, which we're super lucky to have. Joe Vernachio has served as the Allbirds COO since 2001. Before that, he worked at Mountain Hardwear, where he was the president, where he led all aspects of the business. And before that, Joe also served working on the North Face, Nike, Patagonia, and a myriad of other companies. Joe holds a degree in biology and a degree in biochemistry. He's an experienced rock climber and an avid outdoor adventurer, and we're super lucky to have him on. So thanks so much for coming, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction and the promotion there for just a minute, just a second.
Awesome. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, just because, I mean, I can do my best, but you'll do the best.
I'm happy to go through kind of how I got here. So I stumbled into climbing as a young kid and ended up, I'll move rapidly through a bunch of small stories to get to the bigger moments, but I ended up getting to know Yvon Chouinard, and he said, come on out and I'll give you a job in my store out in Ventura. At the time, there were about 25 people in the company at Patagonia. And I went out there and worked for them for a few years, and then moved over to Nike, where I spent a good chunk of my career. And a large portion of that was working in Asia in different countries. So this was back when Asia manufacturing was just getting started. So I opened the Thailand office, and then the Singapore office, and then I managed the Taiwan office of manufacturing. So by the time I'd left, pretty much all manufacturing was offshore, and so dealing directly with the factories and implementing all the products and getting them shipped and delivered. And then I moved back to the US, and I had a few more years at Nike. And then I left there and I moved to Canada, and I managed, I was the COO of Roots for 5 years. So I lived in Toronto, and my wife is Canadian. And my wife and Sasha's mom are best friends. So that's how we come here today. So I managed Roots for a number of years, and then I ran a company in Colorado called Spider, which is a ski brand. And then from there moved to the North Face, where I was vice president of global product, and then president of Mountain Hardwear, and then I came here to Allbirds. So quite a few brands, probably most of them and boy, they're all very, very similar. When you strip off what they make and you get past the veneer underneath it, it's all very, very similar, except for here at Allbirds, where there's a unique layer here. And I think I'm somewhat in a position to be able to fairly judge that there is something very different about this company and about how we approach making product and delivering it to customers.
So what would you say is that sort of that distinct factor at Allbirds?
Yeah, I mean, most companies don't start with a proposition that we are going to be a CO2 neutral or positive company. They start with, we're going to make products and we're going to sell the crap out of them and make as much money as we can. And along the way, if there's some people that are, somewhat conscious of what's going on in the world, they say, oh, well, we should have a sustainability initiative. Or it's impressed upon them from the retailers or their customers. And so they're backed into it. And so they create a department and they call it sustainability. And once a year or twice a year, they have a moment where they celebrate sustainability, and then it goes back in a box. whereas Allbirds is really predicated on sustainability. It's pretty much where we start and stop every conversation. And as you develop product, one of the things you put the things into computer systems and you're calculating all the way along. You're calculating typically the margin. So you say you're going to design the shoe. I'm going to make it out of these materials. You create a bill of materials. You put the costs in, and along the way, it's calculating what your costs are going to be and what your resulting margin is going to be. And it's the heartbeat of how all profitable companies run. The unique thing here is that we first calculate the carbon score. So instead of calculating what a material costs, we calculate what its carbon emissions are in its production. And then we put in its transportation to the factory. And then we put in its transportation back to where we think we're going to sell it. And we created whole carbon score for that. And first and foremost, we hit our carbon score and then we hit our margin. And that's just fundamentally different than any company that I know of in this industry. And then of course, we aren't there yet. We're not at carbon, net zero. And then we buy offsets to take up the balance of it. But on average, if you were to take a Nike running shoe, it's probably it probably produces 20 to 30 kgs of carbon to produce that one pair of shoes. And we have ours down below 7 right now. So we actually have a shoe that's below 1. And we're striving to get to, absolute 0. So how do you do that, right? Because you still have to put things on boats. You still have to use energy to move those products. And so the actual object itself needs to be net positive. So the materials themselves have to consume carbon in its production to be able to offset the rest of the carbon that it's probably going to be produced, because there's still no way to produce it closer to market or where the consumers are. And there's no way to move it without putting it on a boat or an airplane. And so we severely restrict our air freight, whereas most companies very freely air freight product. It's a very heavy score to air freight product. Sea freight is actually very efficient and very good relative to everything else. So yeah, we put these restrictions on ourselves is to hold ourselves to just a higher standard. We don't see the value in making a product that has a CO2 score of 35, no matter how good it is. It's just not worth it to us. But it's a tough decision every single day. And I would say that the materials needed to make the materials in the industrial processes needed to make net negative or carbon products don't exist. And therefore we have to show a financial stream, a financial path to these chemical companies and material suppliers to say, if you make this, we will buy it. And that's the most important thing. I think the thing I try to always impress upon people is, if you want companies to start making things that are less impactful on the planet, your purchases influence that. I guarantee you, I'm trying to think, your local Loblaws did not wake up one day and say, oh, I think we really want organic food in the store. No, the market trend forced them to put organic product. They didn't start as an organic grocery store, but I guarantee you they have a very large organic section today, and it's probably very important to their sales and to their customer. And it's because people walked into the store and they did consumer research and they realized this is a giant trend. And if we're not on it, we're going to lose all these customers. And basically, we as customers have to show that same path to every other product that we purchase. We have to necessarily say, I mean, do you think the Ford Motor Company really wants to make electric cars? I think deep down inside, they don't really want to do it. It's a huge flip over their manufacturing facilities. It's completely different structure they have to create. But they have to. Every time they do consumer research, they're like, guys, if we're not making electric cars, we're out of business. Like, there is no gas powered cars 20 years from now. So if we don't start now, we're never going to get there. And it's not common for the old economy industries and companies to make these transitions. So I'm really interested to watch whether or not these companies can make this transition. I use this example with people all the time. At the turn of the century, when electricity was just starting to, the turn of the last century, not this century, when electricity was just starting to happen and refrigeration and freezers were starting to come into play, there was not one ice manufacturer that pivoted to become a refrigerator manufacturer. Right? There were this huge infrastructure of people making ice and delivering it to people's houses to put it in their houses. And this whole industry completely switched over and not one of them made the transition. So like watching car companies make the transition to become an electric car company, it'll be really interesting to watch from an investment standpoint. I mean, I think if you look back in history, the bets are not with them. The bets are with the Teslas, the ones that start with the new industry, the new point of view on how consumers are going to be consuming. But maybe they'll, Kodak didn't make the transition to digital cameras, right? They own the entire photography industry, and they're pretty much out of business today. And I don't know whether anybody knows, but they invented the very first digital camera. And they just didn't understand it. They just didn't, they struggled to basically put themselves out of business, which is what they would have had to have done by adopting digital. They felt like it was going to really hinder their core business. So from a ESG standpoint, I don't know. I think I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. Like, are you looking at legacy companies making a transition, or are you more focused on new young companies that start with the proposition of ESG in mind?
I mean, just sort of along with our club's mandate, we are highly focused looking at how different companies are sort of adapting with the times. And with that, like we look at examples like Allbirds, a company where it sort of was fostered and adopted these as it grew from the top. But it is interesting to look at these trends basically as they change. You mentioned like a really interesting thing, sort of just about how consumers are driving at least just like the market changes. What do you think is something that sort of like the mainstream of being a sustainable consumer gets wrong, sort of?
What do they get wrong? I don't think they do their homework. I think they take marketing speak. I mean, it's pretty hard pressed to not find almost every single brand today there's some moment during the year where they talk about how amazing they are at sustainability or recycled content or what they do with afterlife of product. And, you really need to go back to the governance of the company and what its real proposition is. And make sure that when they adopt a brand into their portfolio of brands, that it's something that they really understand and believe in, and that company's set of core values are based in that versus, it's a marketing campaign. Because everybody's using recycled polyester today, because guess what? It's pretty much the same price as regular polyester. 10 years ago, recycled polyester was 25% more expensive than regular polyester, and it wasn't as good. You couldn't dye it the same colors. It could turn it in a very muted color. It didn't have the tensile strength, so things would break easier. They'd wear out faster. So you had this more expensive, less durable product. Now it's pretty much on par. It doesn't really cost anymore. And so everybody can use recycled polyester. And that's great. Everybody should use recycled polyester, but it's nothing to celebrate. It's table stakes today. And so, I look for companies that are trying to push what the next step is to push the barrier of where it is. I mean, I think, from the way we calculate our carbon score and also how we went public, if you go online, if you go on edgars.com, I don't know if you guys know about Edgars, but it's where all the companies post all their S1 filings for when they go public. And you can read our S1. It's a 230-page document that took a lot of long nights to write. But in there is something that we call a sustainable public offering, an SPO instead of a IPO. And what we tried to do is create a framework to say, if you claim to be a sustainably based company, here are the standards we're holding ourselves to, that we want to make public, that we think other companies should hold themselves to. And our goal was to kind of put this standard out there that other companies couldn't just greenwash their story when they went to go public. Of course, the SEC was not very happy about that because it sounded to them like a new financial instrument. And therefore, we had to kind of change the name from, I forget what we still called it, an SPO, but we couldn't call it a sustainable public offering. We called it our sustainability position. We made up some other acronym for SPO. But when we speak to it, so in writing, it's something else, but when we speak to it, we still say sustainable public offering. And we think eventually, I think that there will be, at the end of the day, public companies that make products. I can't speak into the service industry and the tech industry, but in our world, they're measured on 3 or 4 things. What's your top line sales growth? What's your margin? What's your expenses you spend in order to get that, right? That gives you your margin, but what's the percent to, and how much inventory do you have? Those 4 numbers, that's what you're judged on. I believe that there will be a day that there will be, and what's your sustainability score? That's what we're hoping for. That there will be another clear, simple, crisp metric that is as indicative of what sales and margin do to your financial results as what that sustainability score would do to your impact on the planet. And I think we're a long way away, but you can see little hints to starting to move towards that, so that you don't have to join a club to try to figure out who to invest in. You would just invest in people with high sustainability scores that have high, growths of sales and great margins and are throwing off a ton of cash, right? I mean, if you could see that number today, it'd be a lot easier to decide where to put your money. We've got 5 minutes here. I mean, anytime I get in front of a bunch of very smart young people, I like to just hear if you have questions or any thoughts. I mean, I'm a grizzled old man, been doing this for 35 years. So you guys are the future, and you guys are the ones that are going to tell us where to go and where to take these companies. So, I mean, anything anybody, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but anything people want to share or ask questions or anything, I'd love to hear from you guys.
I actually had a question. You had mentioned earlier that you use carbon offsets in order to reduce your carbon emissions and your carbon footprint. So I was wondering if you guys have any sort of process that you go through in order to kind of verify where these carbon offsets are coming from. I know that there's some third-party ratings agencies that can rate, okay, this carbon credit comes from let's say this forest, and this forest is sequestering this amount of carbon, et cetera. But do you have any sort of way that you verify on your own end to make sure that, oh yeah, this is actually offsetting the amount of carbon it says it is?
Yeah, so we purchase offsets through an exchange, and that exchange is collecting money to support new projects. So whether it's wind turbines or solar projects, or so our money, the money we are putting in for those offsets are going towards new projects versus just saying this is, just saying this plot of land was going to be bulldozed and turned into apartment buildings, but this money is going to save it from that not happening. There's some of that in this exchange, but not very much. Most of this is how do we get out of the use of fossil fuels? I mean, hence what we're facing right now, right? I mean, two countries on the other side of the world that probably none of us have ever been to decided to go to war. And the only thing that's changing in our world is our gas price. Right? I mean, something's not right.
I also had a question. So I'm really into marketing, and I know you kind of touched on this briefly, but are there any specific marketing tactics that you use to connect with your customer base, and are they all surrounded around sustainability, or do you just kind of market yourself as a shoe brand in general?
Yeah, thanks, Ruby. I mean, that is it's something we literally wrestle with every single day. We wrestle with like, hey, here's a sustainable shoe, and oh, by the way, it's really comfortable and it looks kind of cool. Or here's a really comfortable high performance shoe that looks really good, and oh, by the way, it's sustainable. And what is the order that message should be delivered? And how do you tell the sustainability story? This carbon score thing, we're putting it on the outside of every product from this year on. We're literally putting a stamp with a number on it so you can see what the carbon score is, but nobody knows what a carbon score is. Eventually, we want to get to where what we're developing is similar to what you have on the back of a food item, where you can see the calories and the carbohydrates and protein. We want to be able to basically do a food label on every product. So you could walk into a store, look at a website, and kind of see the product, that product's impact, and come up with a simple name, a word for it, so that sustainability is such a horrible word. It doesn't conjure up the future and harmony with Nate. Like, if I said to you, I wish for all of you to have a very sustainable relationship with your partner whenever you decide to get married in the future. It just doesn't sound very like, we're not really striving to have a sustainable relationship with our spouse, right? We want to have more than that. And I really just don't like the word sustainability. You won't see us use the word sustainability very much. We use it in financial context because Wall Street is a very simple place. We just had our earnings call yesterday, and we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. We talked about our carbon reduction, and we got about an hour and a half of questions And we did not get one question on sustainability or carbon or our impact. We got a million questions on our inventory. We got a million questions on our margin. We got a million questions on how much did we spend to get a new consumer in Q4 of last year, but not one question came on sustainability. Which is kind of crazy, kind of sad. Are people coming in here? Yeah, I'm gonna get kicked out of this room here. I think we're out of time at this point, right, Sasha?
Yeah, I think so. Do you have any, really briefly, any advice for some of us? A lot of us are going to be graduating in the next year or so. Do you have any advice about sort of entering the sphere of sustainability?
If this is what you're interested in, right? You might be interested in makeup, right? I don't know. You might be interested in whatever product or service you're interested in. Pursue it, but make sure that whatever company you join, you understand if they can't articulate to you their values that the company is predicated on, and you don't personally align with those sets of values, don't join the company. It's that simple. Because those values, if they, I bet you half of the people you talk to can't articulate the values of the company. They'll be like, oh, I don't know, make a lot of money. And if the value set is not something that you align to or prescribe to, then there are plenty of other companies. You're about to go into maybe the easiest job market to find a job in the last 50 years. So be really picky, is my advice. The power has completely shifted to the employee. It used to be the companies had all the power and the employees had to march to the beat of the company. The power is completely shifted. The employee has 100%, not 100, has a lot of the power today to dictate how to act and how to behave and what company they want to belong to. So that would be my advice.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Joe.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Good luck. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.